to the Cultivate and Keep podcast. I'm Corey.
And it's your favorite one, Jeremy. Well, probably not, but that's my hope.
I don't know, maybe.
Maybe, dude.
I don't know if people even have favorites right now.
That's true.
I hope they do, and I hope I'm the one, but...
It's probably you, but...
Why do you say that?
You got the better, podcast, presence, I think. The voice. And
audio presence.
Yeah, and I come through with the jokes, I think, and I kind of lighten the mood.
You got a big heart.
Got a big heart.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Well, we got a tight time frame, so let's quit the jibber
jabber. So, quick announcement, just really quick, an update on our /favorites page, so cultivateandkeep.com/favorites.
You'll find my name on that page.
You will? Really?
Get it?
Where?
Favorites.
Oh, because you're the favorite. Come through with the jokes. I see you.
Man.
All right. Anyways.
Shout out to all my fans.
That was probably the
lamest thing I've ever said on this podcast. Wow.
Shout out to all my fans.
So stupid. Okay.
We're building out a favorites a page called the favorites page, and it's full of all of our favorite resources for Christian men. So books, apps, amazing websites, nonprofits and ministries, a lot of great stuff. So we would love for you to go check it out. Tell us what you think. We're also looking for help in building it out. So if you have any suggestions, your favorite book, your favorite app, your favorite website, your favorite nonprofit that you want to support and you think that we should mention, feel free to email us or send us a DM on social media, and we'll be sure to get that on there. All right, so what are we talking about today, Cheer Swag?
I'm excited.
I like this one.
Yeah. Today we're going to talk about the that passage in Romans where Paul talks about the idea of why do I do the very thing that I hate. And I think the title of the passage is A Conflict of Two Natures. And kind of just talking about the idea of there are things in our life, and I want to kind of expand and talk about more than just sin. I think when we hear that verse, we think of just sin in our life, but in general, there's a lot of things that I do personally that I hate, and why am I stuck in these patterns, whether it's a sin or a big one is the way I interact and treat people, relationships, wanting to start certain habits, that could expand into so many areas. But why do I do the very thing that I hate? And it's this idea of we know what is right, we know what is good in most cases, and we aim to do that, but we constantly fall short. And so Paul, if you haven't read it, it's Romans 7:15-20, and that is kind of what it's about, this idea of he's expressing kind of being stuck and wanting to see change.
Yeah, #relatable. Cool. So let's...
Wow, that was really bad. #relatable.
Dude, I love using hashtags.
I know you do.
I'm all about hashtags. Ever since they became not cool, they were my favorite instantly.
Sounds about right.
That's just how it worked. Anyways, so I'll read through this. Forgive me in advance. I want to do my best to read through this, but the Bible is kind of hard to read sometimes, especially it matters a lot what translation you have. I think we have a pretty good one, but anyways, we're going to be reading in Romans 7:15-20. So it says, For what I am doing, I do not understand. For I am not practicing what I would like to do, but I am doing the very thing I hate. But if I do the very thing I do not want to do, I agree with the law, confessing that the law is good. So now no longer am I the one doing it, but the sin which dwells in me. For I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is, in my flesh. For the willing is present in me, but the doing of the good is not. For the good that I want I do not do, but I practice the very evil that I do not want. But if I am doing the very thing that I do not want, I am no longer the one doing it. I'm no longer the one doing it, but sin which dwells in me. So that's a little bit, it's kind of like a tongue twister in a lot of ways.
Pretty weird.
But I think it's really well summed up in that, even just that first verse where he says, for what I am doing, I do not understand. I am not practicing what I would like to do, but I am doing the very thing that I hate.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
He has a few kind of just statements I wanted to hit on. He says, hold on, lost my spot. Okay, so he says in verse 14, I am of the flesh, sold under sin. Verse 15, he says, I do the very thing that I hate. Then he says, wretched man that I am in verse 24. And then the last verse, in verse 25, we actually didn't read these ones, but he says, with my flesh I serve the law of sin. And there's a few pretty intense things to say, and especially Paul. If you know anything about Paul, he was a man that loved Jesus and was devoted to follow him. But these statements that he's saying doesn't really sound like a person that who says earlier in Romans 8:2, he talked about that the Spirit of Jesus like lives in him and that he's free. But right now he's talking about being a slave to sin and
It's
being
not really the
stuck
Paul
under
that
law.
we know.
It's not the Paul that we know, and it doesn't sound like a man that has a Spirit of God in him.
Yeah.
And that was just the previous, the next chapter he talks about that. And so when I was reading through this, it caught my attention. I was like, wait, why would he like literally 10 verses before this, he's sharing all this right now of basically hating himself.
Yeah.
And the next chapter says, I'm free, the Spirit of God lives in me. And it kind of like caught my attention and kind of got me thinking about like, I don't know, like this is a big topic, and I think that we kind of glance over it. But I think it applies in so many ways. And I kind of said in the intro of just the idea of most of us, well, first of all, this applies to all of us with sin. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
Every single one of us.
Every single one of us can understand that this is #relatable.
Yeah, because of our sin. But I think that's mainly how we identify with this passage. And if you've heard it at church, like by a pastor, this is probably, we know the context. But I like thinking of it outside of just sin, like simply like, what are some habits in your life that you've been fighting for a long time to start and you can't do it? What about, I don't know, just friends you interact with or close people that you love in your life that you don't always love the way that you treat, or I don't know, it expands. There's so many ways to take it, and it kind of excites me thinking about just this idea of the two natures of, we know what we want, but we let our nature get the best of us and kind of our sin and our selfishness.
Yeah, I think that this passage has always stuck out to me, and I think actually I'm remembering a little bit now. When I was a sophomore in high school, and I had just kind of come off of winter camp, my first experience with the Lord, and I was coming back to the idea of following the Lord and becoming a Christian and rededicating my life. I was on this kick of reading the Bible, and actually rereading the Bible, because I had already kind of read through it as a kid. But this was one of the ones I remember reading through and being like, whoa, like this is really hefty stuff. And it was just so real in that time for me, especially battling with my faith and with my sin that I was dealing with, because I think everyone, especially at certain points in their life, but everyone, even in every day, are just like, why am I doing this? Or why am I this way? Or why am I stuck in this thing or in this situation? And, he talks about a little bit, but we're always a slave to our flesh naturally. Like that's kind of the default way that we are in our broken and sinful kind of ways as human beings. But it's not who we're supposed to be. So it's always this question of, why am I doing this? And why am I acting this way? And why am I thinking these thoughts?
Yeah. So most of us, we recognize, okay, where I am today, what I'm doing right now is not what I want for my life. So most of us desire like to do good. We want kind of like the next and better thing. And we know that about Paul. Paul, you kind of can tell like the way he's writing, but he had like a deep desire and longing to, he wanted to be closer to Jesus, but with that, he didn't want to do things that he hated, right? And so we know that these shortcomings he's describing, these falling back in times of falling back into sin, that wasn't, I didn't want to say, I don't think that was like a consistent part of Paul's life. I don't think he was like consistently failing. I think like most Christians, this was a part of his Christian walk of, there are certain sins or habits that we have a hard time breaking. And so they were, rather than just a consistent, always engulfed in sin, it was occasional, falling back and making mistakes.
Well, he says in verse 17, so now no longer am I the one doing it, but sin which dwells in me. For I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is in my flesh, for the willing is present in me, but the doing of the good is not. So he's talking about how even as a Christian, sin can creep into your life. And then when you're in these spots where like, why am I doing this? It's because you've let sin back in your life, or it's because there's some part of you that's not fully devoted to Jesus. And so it's sort of interesting because he says it's not me, because he, as a Christian, he's been made new. He is God's, but it's the sin that he's letting have a part in his life.
If you read the passage, it's kind of like it's like a gradual, like he comes to like a certain understanding. Like as you're reading it, it's kind of like he's talking to himself.
Yeah,
like,
he's like kind of figuring it out as he's writing it.
And I think like kind of the whole idea he's talking about is really the whole Christian life of being sanctified, and kind of the idea of we're continually in a warfare and continually day by day improving and really identifying the things in our life that need to be worked on and need to be I don't want to say fixed, but that need Jesus, right? So Paul is obviously talking about the things he can't beat, but that's really what he's talking about, the idea of being sanctified and what that means as a Christian.
Well, you know what's interesting? Correct me if I'm wrong, but to be sanctified means to be like purified, and I think the actual word comes from like to be tried by fire. Am I wrong? Am I totally off?
I think you're right with that.
That feels right. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But
Just go with it, Corey.
But it's interesting because that makes a lot of sense, because if you're being sanctified and you're being tried by fire, really what that's doing is that it's revealing all the blemishes and all the kind of shortcomings that you have and all the ways that you need God to come in completely. But it's surfacing those, right? So when Paul's like, why am I doing these things? Well, it's because God is actually dealing with these things or these parts of your life that you haven't touched before, or that the devil has had a stronghold in your life before. So this idea of sanctification, that he's purifying you and that it's a process and that he's making you more like him, in turn, it's going to make you battle with a lot of things that maybe you haven't battled with before.
Mm-hmm. That gets me thinking about the idea of, so as Christians, I think our whole lives, there's this general like massive idea that follows us, like the theme of not yet, of whether it's like waiting for things that we want or whether it's overcoming a struggle, the idea of not yet, and kind of thinking of like most things that we go through our process, and most things that we want, it's going to take time. And so whether it's the battle of becoming kind of what Paul's talking about, becoming the person you want to be, and to stop doing the things that we hate, which I almost like, I want to laugh when I say that, because it's so,
why am I a lazy piece of crap?
It's like, we just like, man, like so when I read this, I was thinking to myself, I do most of my reading in the morning before I start my day. And so oftentimes I'll read and I'll have these great moments of just like saturating myself in the word and prayer and thinking like, man, like I'm gonna crush today. And not like a prideful way.
I can see you just like looking around like, I own this place.
Okay, but hold on, that's not what I meant. What I mean is like with kindness, Corey. Like I'm gonna crush. Right. I'm gonna be nice to you.
I'm with kindness.
Yeah, like, and I'm being genuine, and you're just crushing my moment.
Sorry.
No, like the idea of like sitting there and just saying like, man, like I want to love people today. I want to do good to those around me, and I want to like bless others, those that are close to me and those that aren't close, that I don't really know, right? And so I have these times of like just being like lasered focused, like, okay, like today's gonna be that. And then like my first opportunity I get, I'm on the road and I'm like, screw you, person that cut me, whatever, right? Off. Just full of like anger and frustration. And so it's like, I think when I read this, that's kind of what I thought of, like, man, like I know in my heart, like how I want to be positioned like towards people. I know like the kind of man I want to be in that respect, but why is it such a struggle for me? Like, why how can I have this moment of being so like locked in with the presence of God and like saying like, this is it, this is how I need to be, and then 5 minutes later, my first chance, I'm already messing up. Right. So there's that, and then I think about, what about those that are close to me? What about those that I'm in like contact with daily? Like even those people, like why do I, at times not treat them the way that I want to treat them? And so just whole idea of I know this is wrong. Like this is not how it should be. Like why do I keep doing this? That's kind of what prompted us wanting to talk about it today. Was kind of thinking through that whole process.
Yeah. Well. And I think this gets down to the meat of the whole topic, but the sort of overarching theme of it in a lot of ways is just this idea of like the continual, perpetual struggle. Mm-hmm. And it's the battle within, and it's the battle of flesh and spirit. And it's the battle of good and evil. It's the battle of Satan and God. And it's all happening inside of you. And it's going to continue happening. But I think what we're getting at is that it is going to be this continual spiritual warfare inside of you. In a lot of ways, this passage, just in a few short sentences, kind of perfectly sums up the whole idea of human nature, right? That our fallen state as human beings, God created us in his image and we are perfect. And then Satan tempted men and we fell and we sinned, and now we're broken, right? There's still a glimpse of who God wants us to be, and we still have that chance to be redeemed. Yeah. But even if we're Christians, we're still not perfect, and we still struggle, and we're going to continue to struggle. So there's this battle that goes on every day inside of us, and in a lot of kind of respects, it's just that life is a struggle, and it's not going to be easy. We're to kind of expect that, especially in the context of being a man as a Christian, but to expect that everything is going to go right, or that you have it all figured out, that once you overcome this thing, that you have it overcome once and for all, is just not true, and it's just going to kind of set you up for failure down the road.
Which I think it's easy to hear that and to kind of feel deflated. Like as you were talking,
Yeah,
I
it's
was
like,
I was like, dang, like, you know, like, but I don't know. I think that I don't want to say, I don't want to use the word embracing, but I think just understanding, like, that's the reality.
That's a good word for it.
You think so?
Yeah.
Well, just think like that's the reality. Like we have our fallen nature. You know, man is fallen, and we are in this broken world, and so this is the reality of what we face. And so I think just we can say embracing that and agreeing with it and saying, okay, but like let's make the change. Let's not buy in. It rather than being deflated, you can spin it around to be, I would say, almost like motivated and like let's freaking punch us in the face. Like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like just flip it, you know?
Well, it's encouraging to know, like, one, this is normal, and that everyone struggles with it, and that two, you can have victory over it, and that there's a way out. Like, God gives us that victory, and He completes us with His Holy Spirit. He empowers us to overcome those things. But again, to expect that it's going to happen, that you are going to struggle with it, like, that's okay, that's normal, but you can have victory over it ultimately.
Yeah, one thing I want to say was not using that as an excuse to fall back into sin. I think it's easy because I have found myself there many times of just saying, like, man, like, well, back at it, or this is normal, because it's that pattern of like hitting a wall and falling down. Yeah. And just because we can come to terms with it's going to be our life's a process of this, our life's a process of overcoming stuff, doesn't mean we can use it as a crutch to fall back into sin, or to say, oh, like, my life's a process, like, back to sinning again, you know? Like, it shouldn't be like that.
Right. So I'll read that kind of concluding verse a little bit to this section, but it's Romans 8:23, and he says, and not only this, but also we ourselves, having the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting eagerly for our adoption as sons, the redemption of our body. And this is essentially the same as the cry, "O wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death?" Right? Well, we can have victory over it, and there is the redemption over this kind of struggle.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. You want to go into the...
So let's talk about kind of just three main areas of life that I think this could apply to. The first and obvious one, which we've already touched on, I think all of these we've touched on, but the obvious one is habitual sin. So when you read this verse, kind of what comes to your mind? Well, obviously the main one is going to be sin. And as I was like thinking through my notes, I don't know how or why, but I had a picture of like someone running an obstacle course, and I think of one of those like mud runs to where like it's like an intense... Why are you laughing at me? You're smiling.
No, I just have no idea where you're going with this.
Okay, well, about to spit fire. So
yeah, continue, please. Enlighten me.
So mud runs, like, they're crazy obstacle courses, like, you know, it's like a river with mud basically that you have to run a race through. But I was picturing that, like, an obstacle course like that, and coming to a point where there is like a straight wall that goes up, let's just say 50 feet, right? And it's flat. There's no surface that you can grab onto. There's no like divots or like rocks you can like pull yourself up with. It's just like literally a flat wood wall, no rope, no nothing, and you have to go over it. I was kind of thinking like that's how it feels oftentimes. Like I think our Christian walk, especially with sin, like you're running an obstacle course, right? You're living life, you're doing what you can, and it comes a point where you just keep like hitting like a certain sin. You can't climb it. I've been there. I literally can't get past something. I don't know why, and it's like those moments of like, dude, like I know this is wrong. Like I know like I don't want to do this thing, but I keep going back to it, and why is that? That's kind of what I pictured. I think it's important to know, like, reading that last verse talking about, freedom, what comes from overcoming sin. Like there are ways to overcome that, and it's like we tell ourselves this, we know it, and we go back to it. And I think it's kind of taking yourself right back to square one and like refocusing yourself and saying, no, like I can overcome this. There's freedom. There are ways to accomplish this.
Yeah, totally. Another practical kind of application of this, number 2, is in good and bad habits. So, we decide that we're going to, start making something good. Maybe we're going to start working out. We're going to start eating healthy, waking up early, reading more. I mean, I know that I've thought and tried all these same things, trying new things, developing a skill, right? But we get all excited about the idea that we could do this thing and we can overcome it. And, the Lord's going to use us in this great way. Maybe we're getting involved in the ministry or whatever it is. But then there comes a few days in and things get hard or things get difficult or there's some sort of, again, obstacle. and then you get discouraged and you give up, and you kind of feel like you're back in square one. And I think that this is sort of, again, habits are, well, it's sort of this is kind of a good application of it, but good habits take, I think, what do they say, like 21 days or something, like, but it only takes like a day to break a bad habit, right? So you spend all this time working towards something, or, God, I'm going to read my Bible every day, or I'm going to start treating people this way, or I'm going to love my wife this way. And then it only takes one time for it kind of all to crumble a little bit. And then you're sitting there thinking, why did I do this? Or why am I the way that I am? Or why can't I just, continue doing this thing? Why do I have to stop going back into my old ways? And you just have to keep building that good habit. And you have to keep rebuilding those habits, and know that, like, again, there's going to be a victory in it, but the Lord's going to use you in building those habits, and ultimately he's going to fulfill, right, his promise for whatever that thing is.
Yeah, it's kind of like most, I think, in life, with most things that are good, it takes time, and most things that are bad, it's immediate. I was listening to a podcast this week, and they were talking about the idea of like going to the gym and working out, right? So if you decide I want to be fit, I want to be in shape and look better. When you commit to going to the gym, it's like at first it's not going to be easy. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to cost you money, inconvenience. You're going to be sore, sweaty. So it's like you going initially is going to be hard, but probably 2 or 3 weeks down the road, a few months down the road, you're hopefully going to look better, shed some pounds, look better, right? The idea of wanting to have a couple more cookies or brownies, it's like
it's so easy.
You have it. Yeah. It's like you're immediately happy and satisfied. Yeah. But actually, a couple hours later, you might feel sick. So it's kind of the opposite. It's like the good typically comes for bad things. The good comes first, right? Eating that brownie, the good came right away, and it was bad after. But for like good stuff for your life, the good part of that is typically delayed, right? And I think it's the same idea of what we're talking about here. Is for developing good habits. It's like putting that habit in place is going to take work, and if you mess up a little bit, it's going to be easy to stop. But like the fruit of the good habit that comes down the road is so much more beneficial than the immediate gratification from what you're currently indulging in.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, good things are hard, bad things are easy, and it reminds me of the parable of the straight and the narrow, or the straight and narrow path, and then the narrow and the wide paths. And the wide path is easy, and it's straight, and everyone goes that. The gate is white. And then you have the narrow, and it's hard, and it's long, and it's windy, and you can't see the end. But that's the path that leads to life.
Yeah. Our third and last point was relationships. I think we hit on this already. I don't want to spend too much time, but I kind of wanted to ask the question, kind of get you thinking. Do you ever think to yourself that how can you treat people better? Like, do you ever decide, like, I today I'm going to be a better friend or better spouse, whatever it is? Like if you ask yourself that question, but then you find yourself not following through, like think of the why. What caused you to hit that point to where you didn't follow through? Was it an initial reaction you had that you've kind of trained your mind to do? Whatever that may be, I think it's important to kind of like pull apart and dissect it of, why are you failing? Like, why is it, if you can have such clear thinking at one moment and then the next moment not, like what's causing that?
Yeah, no, for sure. That's a great,
especially with people,
question to ask. Yeah. You're like, why can't I love this person, or why can't I accept this person, or it could even be the other way around. Like, why is this person continuing to do the same thing and they don't treat me any differently?
Yeah. So I think just overall, like, so what is the answer to like this struggle of the two natures in us? Like, what are we getting at? What is the answer? I don't think we have.
Well, there's never like a single answer.
A single answer. One that I did want to say was really encourage you to read the following chapter, Romans 8. I think there's a lot of encouragement in life that's spoken into that. We have, I think, a part of that we put in our notes if Corey wants to come through and read it.
I'll read.
Just so you guys know, I've designated Corey as the official reader.
Somehow I got stuck with that job. It's okay.
His part.
I'm glad they accept.
So this is
good things are hard.
Romans 8, 6 through 13.
Yeah. So I don't think I'll read through the whole thing because the first ones summarize it. But it starts out with, "For the mind set on the flesh is death, but the mind set on the spirit is life and peace. Because the mind set on the flesh is hostile towards God, for it does not subject itself to the law of God, for it is not even able to do so, and those who are not in the flesh cannot please God. However, if you are not in the flesh but in the Spirit, if indeed the Spirit of God dwells in you, But if anyone does not have the Spirit of Christ, he does not belong to him. If Christ is in you, though the body is dead because of sin, yet the Spirit is alive because of righteousness. And also reminds me of 2 Corinthians 10, 3-5. He says, for though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. For the weapons of warfare are not in the flesh, but are divinely powerful for the destruction of fortresses. We are destroying speculations of every lofty or rising thing, and we are taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. I think the main kind of takeaway here is that don't fight fleshly things with fleshly things. Like there's no kind of secret formula or amazing habit or 30-day, cleanse that can help you through this. You have to fight this spiritual warfare with God. Like you can't fight the flesh with the flesh. You have to fight the flesh with the Spirit. So fight it with God's word. Fight it with worship. Fight it with accountability. Fight it with fellowship. Fight it with spiritual things, not fleshly things.
Yeah, I think reminding yourself that fleshly mindset will more times than not probably take you down, and it's gonna probably bring you to that end result of failing and kind of hitting that wall and falling down.
Yeah.
I think it's but understanding that we live with the Spirit, and the Spirit of God is in you. So simply like fill your mind and your heart with things of the Spirit,
and the Spirit overcomes those things for you. Yeah, I love that. Well, I think this has been a super interesting topic, and we would love to hear more about your thoughts on it and what you struggle with, and kind of what you think are some amazing ways that God has helped you overcome these things. So if you want to contact us in any way, if you want to tell us, you can email us at cultivateandkeep.com. You can find us on IG, Instagram. Give us a shout out there. Subscribe, share it with a friend if you liked it, and we will see you later.
Peace.